You're listening to Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales. To find out more, visit polfed.org. You can listen and download our podcasts via most podcast platforms. Simply search for Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales.
Hello and welcome to Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales. On August the 4th, 2025, the UK government announced a 4.2% pay increase for police officers, effective from September the 1st. This increase applies to all police ranks up to Chief Superintendent in England and Wales. The government is providing an extra £120 million in additional funding to help forces manage the cost of this pay rise. This pay increase completes the 2025 pay round for public sector workers, whose pay is determined by the review bodies. And the Police Federation has had its part to play in making recommendations to this review body. So in this podcast today, we're going to take a detailed look at that process, at the recommendations that we made, and get an in-depth response to this pay award. So to do this, we're joined by John Partington, who's the National Secretary for the Police Federation of England and Wales. John, welcome to the podcast. And first of all, your response, please, to this pay award.
My reaction, I was slightly surprised because all the other pay review bodies had returned their reports and obviously had figures around the 4% up to the 4.5% in the armed forces. And because ours was delayed, I was worrying that it may be even as low as 3.5%. When it did come out as it did at 4.2%, I was slightly surprised. But although it doesn't obviously rectify the long-term loss of police pay, depending on how inflation is over the next year, this could make a small inroads into some of that pay degradation.
Yes, so you mentioned there, obviously, the inflation, the rate of inflation. You know, it could be as little as 0.1% above the inflation as it stands. So is this a real terms pay increase?
If you look at it, depends how you look at it. So if you compare it to consumer price index, currently that's 3.6%. But if you can, like you've just said, if you add the housing into that equation as well, then you're at 4.1%. But the government are forecasting that inflation will drop over the next year. And if that is the case, then it will be a real terms pay increase. But obviously, as we all know, these things always don't work out the way that they are planned. So we won't really know whether it's a real terms pay increase until we work through the next year, September to September.
Obviously, you know, you're here today to talk on behalf of the Police Federation, but can you tell us a little bit about how this figure does compare with some of the other public sector pay increases that have either been awarded or are expected?
We're just under average. So if you look at the top end, you've got the armed forces at 4.5%, and then you've got the National Crime Agency at 4.4%, and then sitting beneath us are the prison officers and the teachers at 4%, and we're sitting there in the middle at 4.2%. I think if you take the median average, it would probably work out at 4.3%. So we're probably average across the public sector, maybe a fraction under.
No, I know you're probably sick of hearing this question about how the pay award is arrived at and what role the Police Federation play within that process. But could you outline it again for us here? And more importantly, can you say that you think the Federation has had an influence on this actual pay award?
Yes, so obviously the government issue a remit letter which instructs the pay review body to look at police pay and certain other areas. The remit letter from the government was very open, asking them to look at paying conditions for police officers and to report back to the government. Obviously, what the peer review body do then, they will do their own work and they will go out and get their own economic data, their own workforce data to feed into their report. But they also then ask for submissions from various parties, the National Police Chiefs Council being one, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners being another. They will take information from the Home Office, from the Policing Minister, and also they'll take information from staff associations. Normally that is in the form of a written submission to them, but obviously since 2021 we have withdrawn from the peer review body process because of our frustrations that we felt that our evidence was being overlooked and not given the relevant weight that it deserved. But we haven't totally disengaged because we felt that that wouldn't be beneficial to our members. So every year we do issue what we call a pay positioning document, which outlines the issues on behalf of our members. And we also give our own workforce data, our own economic data, as we see that it affects officers. And this year we took slightly a different approach this year. So what we did, rather than just go to the pay review body and say police officers need more pay, it should be such a figure, and they're all struggling for various reasons, we thought we'd try and tackle it in a slightly different way and identify where there are potential savings and where those savings can be made when you increase police officer pay. So what we identified was that retention is a key issue. I mean, we're losing about 5,000 officers voluntarily a year now, and 2/3 of those within the first 5 years of service. And then when we looked at that and then looked at the kind of money it costs to recruit and train new officers, our figures, some of the data was taken from the government statistics anyway, but our figures showed that that was costing £2 billion a year. Now, obviously, some of that would have been needed anyway because we always have a need for new officers. But we felt that the retention level had increased and that there were potential some savings that could be made there. So the arguments that we were making, that was that a fair pay award now, which is in reality a real terms pay award, would help retain some of those officers through the first 5 years of service, where you get to the levels of pay where you don't see the same level of percentage degradation. So the pay review body didn't accept fully our arguments around that. They did put in their report that they felt there were enough recruits coming through the process. But they did identify that there is a need to retain skills and experience if you're going to deliver on the government's agendas around crime. So I think our arguments around that did resonate with them. I think it did have an impact, and I do think it did influence the award being at 4.2%. And I think we need to bear in mind here as well, although it's mentioned that the Chiefs wanted 3.8%, in their actual paper, they were budgeting for 2% pay awards. So the Chiefs are budgeting for 2%, wanted 3.8%. A lot of weight is generally given to the submissions by the MPCC, but obviously the peer review body has decided to go higher at 4.2%. So I think we can take some credit on influencing that award. Obviously, I think it was highly dependent on the government as well, moving some money around the Home Office budget because £120 million has been moved into the police budgets to help pay for this so that it doesn't have an impact on policing. So to answer, yes, I do think we did influence it. You can't say categorically, but I think we have.
And how's this fit into the wider scheme of work, if you like, that the Federation are doing when it comes to pay? What's next in that process?
So what we didn't only take a new look on like trying to look at problems within the budget. We took a different approach as well when it came to our membership. So for the first time ever, before we submitted pay positioning document to the pay review body, we actually wrote to all of our members highlighting the numerous areas that we were going to be asking for on their behalf. So that was something very new, that we've been more open with the membership and informing them more about what we're doing. But also we're going to involve them at the end stage as well. So what we're doing at the moment is we are polling our members on whether or not they want to accept that pay award. Now, it's important here that we mention that it is a pay award. It's not a pay offer. And no matter whether people say yes or no, they accept the award or not, the award will be implemented and will be applied to police officers. What we're trying to do with this poll is to gauge the level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the pay award. Because it's very easy for me to walk in to government or to the Home Office and say, police officers aren't happy with their pay. They still feel undervalued. It's much better if I can have tens of thousands of police officers who have voted, who have said, no, I don't like this pay award. It's not suitable for the job that I do. And so the evidence coming from that poll is very important moving forward. It's very important for the industrial rights work that we're doing as well, to say that police officers are happy with the pay system that they've got. And it's also very important as well for the next pay review round to feed into to the pay review body that officers are still unhappy with what they're being paid. So a reminder as well here for everyone that the poll is still live at the moment, and you should all have an email in your force email inbox. So we'd ask as many of you as possible to complete that poll if you haven't already done so, because it will help us formulate our arguments around industrial rights and around the next evidence for the pay review body moving forward.
But just to reiterate, regardless as to the outcomes of this poll, the pay award stands. It won't affect officers' pay. It's just, as you say, an indicator for the Federation in further dealings with the government. This podcast, obviously, some people will be listening to it after this poll was closed, and things may have moved on a little bit further from at the time of recording. Is there anything else you can tell us about kind of the approach to pay and conditions and the approach that the Federation is taking in particular?
Yeah, so a lot of people will remember that July last year, just over a year ago, we did poll our members on whether or not they wanted us to pursue a collective bargaining on their behalf. And over 50,000 of our members voted over 97% in favour that they would prefer collective bargaining. So this is something that we've not forgotten about. And to that end, we have laid an early day motion in Parliament, which has been signed by a number of MPs. And within that early day motion, it's very clear our position that we want collective bargaining and binding arbitration. But we always did say that we would have to get some political support behind us, which we are doing at the moment. But we also said that because it was a new government, we would give them one cycle of the pay review body to see what was happening. Like I said, the poll will help us feed into that work.
So let's look back then. What else is in the summary from the PRRB? What else? What other details are in there that are of importance to our members?
So, like I said, we wrote to everyone early in the year outlining things that we would be asking for on their behalf. And although the headline figures, I'll just mention the headline figures now, what's actually going to be implemented from September moving forward. It was a 4.2% pay uplift, which was consolidated. Consolidated means it's permanent, which means it will be factored into any future pay awards, and also for any pension contributions, it'll be factored into that as well. London weighting went up 4.2%, and so did the dog handlers allowance, although it wasn't in the headline figures. It is later on in the report where that did go up. And then we managed to get some increases to on-call allowance moves from £25 to £35, away from home allowance from £50 to £60, and the hardship allowance from £30 to £40. And there's been a modification of the motor vehicle allowances where the two lower bands have been removed, so it's just a higher band for essential users now for motor vehicles. But so they're the things that will be implemented moving forward. But there was a lot of other good things in the report that came from the work that we'd done within PFEW. There's about 8 of them. I'll go through them quickly. The first is a shift disturbance allowance. We heard a lot of evidence from officers that they were having their shifts changed at very short notice. We had some very detailed evidence from Cumbria and Sussex around this. And when you look at Police Scotland, they do have in their terms and conditions a shift disturbance payment. So what we thought was we would ask for something similar, that there is an allowance that's paid to officers when the shifts are changed at short notice. Obviously, officers should have 90 days notice of what times they're working, but we all know that these get moved and changed. That's the issue with policing. But when they are changed, it often comes with a financial implication for the officer, and it's obviously an impact on the officer's life. So we felt an allowance for this would be suitable. The pay review body haven't said, yes, one will be implemented, but what they've asked for is proposals to be worked through between the various parties to be presented to them in the next report. So we need to now work with the MPCC and see whether or not we can come to some kind of consensus on what a type of allowance would look like. And I think it's important here that chiefs do look forward and recognise that this is a potential recommendation from the pay review body next year, if they like what proposals put forward, and then if they agree with that. So I think chiefs need to be factoring in to their budgets the potential that some of this allowance and some of the other ones may need to be paid moving forward from next year. So that was the first one. I'll move on to the second one. I think they had some concerns with the mutual aid package. Obviously, it's split into some different payments. The away from home overnight allowance and then the hardship allowance. And I think they want a more simplified approach to this. If you follow the model in Police Scotland, it does give you a more simplified approach, and it does get away from this terminology, what is held in reserve and whether or not you qualify for a certain payment. We would like the payments to be higher. Police Scotland do get more. We have seen an increase in the payments, but I don't think it properly recompenses public order officers who are often pulled away from their families for a significant period of time. So they have asked for that mutual aid package to be looked at, and that was part of our submissions, that the package does need reviewing, both how it operates and the monetary side of it, what it operates as well. The one good thing that they did mention on the mutual aid package is they would like to see, on top of the package, a period of uninterrupted rest for officers who are on mutual aid for extended periods of time, which would be good for officers when they are away. The next one, which was a specific ask by the Police Federation, was a detective allowance. We know that our detectives need to do exams and maintain certain accreditations to be detectives, and often they do take a drop in pay when they move across to the CID because they're often not then qualifying for the unsociable hours payments. And there is a problem with recruiting into the detective fields. So they've asked for that to be plans and proposals for that to be put forward to them next year. And again, we will work with the MPCC on putting those proposals together. And again, chiefs need to be mindful that this could be implemented from next September. So they need to budget accordingly. We obviously, last year, we had some success with increasing the annual leave allowance entitlements and reducing the time it takes to get to the top of the annual leave scale. We are still pushing for long service leave and recuperation leave as well, where if someone's injured on duty or needs some time away from the workplace for a very short period of time, then recuperation leave can be authorised by an immediate line manager and not affect their sickness attendance management policies. They have asked for these two areas to be looked at, more so the recuperation leave. They want to see some proposals around that, which I think would be the right thing to do for officers. Officers are often forced to go sick when they've had issues at work where they've been injured, and I don't think that's the case. If officers need some time away when they're injured on duty, it should be down to immediate line managers to authorise some short-term recuperation leave. The pay review body did suggest that the MPCC work towards a simplified approach around acting up, temporary salary and temporary promotion. these are often areas within regulations that are confused. We get many questions on this all the time, and we think one simple approach would be more suitable within policing. You're either operating at the higher rank or you're not operating at the higher rank. If you are, you should be paid from day one, and the pay should be reckonable for your pension purposes. We think this system could be simplified and save a lot of time and effort in working out what people are being paid. There was obviously arguments put forward that we revisit the PMB 1994 agreement that affects the inspecting ranks. This is long overdue. It's 31 years without a review. It's not fit for purpose, from our view, for modern policing. I knew that this would be very difficult for them to look at because it covers a multitude of areas. And the system that we've got now, rather than the police negotiating board, isn't perhaps suitable to look at things in its entirety. So I did ask for a certain interim payment for the inspecting ranks, and this, again, they've asked for proposals for this to be put forward, a time limited payment for the inspecting ranks until the 1994 agreement can be looked at. There's easy quick fixes for many of these things, and an easy quick fix for this one would be to follow what the superintendents have, which is a recognition of workload payment. The superintendent ranks are salaried, exactly the same as the inspecting ranks, so it seems odd that they get recognition of workload payments in certain positions, but the inspecting ranks don't. So we'd like to see this time limited payment introduced for the inspecting ranks as early as possible. Like I said, the earliest it will be next September, but we'll work through some proposals for that. A good thing in the report, they want to see a quick increase in paternity leave to 2 weeks, which then increases over the next few years. We know some forces already do pay this, but we'd like to see that consistent and in regulations across England and Wales. And so, yeah, there were specific asks, and we did outline these to the membership at the start of the year. And hopefully, as we move forward into the next pay review cycle for 2026, we can work towards having some of these implemented in police regulations, which will make a difference for officers' work-life balance, officers' well-being, but also compensate officers when there is an impact on their life or when they do certain roles within policing.
That is such a comprehensive list there, and thank you for outlining it. I know we spoke about many of those issues and asks the last time we recorded a podcast. It's encouraging to see that obviously some of that has come about, but I get the feeling it's a little bit like painting the fourth bridge, that you just finish one kind of round of recommendations, if you like, and then it's time for the next. So in light of that, is it too early to talk about what we want next year's pay review to look like?
So we did make some other submissions around reducing the constables' pay points so we could get people up the scale more quickly to the better levels of pay. But the pay review body were very clear that because of the reform work that's going on within policing, that there were certain areas that they didn't want to look at, and that included the base pay for each rank. It included the pay points within each rank, targeted variable payments. It included pay progression standard, and the PMB agreement for the inspecting ranks included as well. So there are certain areas where they feel that they can't look at those areas until they get the workforce strategy. They have asked for that strategy, or a draft of it at the very least, before their next report. So moving forward, it looks like there won't be any movement in those areas I've just mentioned. It does look like we can make some inroads into these allowances and payments that I've just mentioned. But moving forward, I think it's important to recognise that the Home Office budget is forecast to shrink by 1.7% in real terms. Now, obviously, to get the pay award we did this time, there was money moved around the Home Office budget to pay for it. And I think I'm concerned as we move forward. I don't think this is unique to the Home Office. I think it'll be across the entire public sector. I think there'll be a limited amount of money available for pay awards. So I think over the next couple of years, we need to be more realistic. We will make the case and we will find reasons why money can be saved in certain areas to be put towards a pay award. But I think on the face of it, I think if we're looking at inflation matching pay awards, that will be probably the same across the public sector. I don't think there'll be real terms pay awards. But what needs to happen now moving forward is the chiefs and the APCCs need to start looking at their own budgets and where they can make efficiency savings. Because if there's no efficiency savings, the Treasury have made it very clear that there then shouldn't be any real terms pay increases. So we need to start, I think the force, the police service in its entirety need to look where these savings can be made, because if we don't increase police officer pay, we're going to have this same constant cycle of people coming in, people leaving, which doesn't give the public and the taxpayer the experience that they need and the skills that they need within the police service. And the government don't get the officers they need to deliver the agenda that they want to deliver. So I think there's some wider work to do there, because like I said, on the face of it, we're looking at inflation matching awards at the moment, but there is work that can be done to make sure that that isn't the case.
I suppose, in light of what you're saying there about financial constraints, it does feed into the Copped Enough kind of campaign that the Federation's been running for a while now. Yes, money's a big factor in this. Let's, of course, not ignore that. But what other kind of things do you think the Federation is working on and working towards in light of Copped Enough, where finance isn't, the number one issue? There's other things that play into morale and retention and things like that. Tell us a little bit about how some of the wider work fits in with the Copped Enough campaign.
So I think it's important to say here that we'd love to be in a position where we knock the Copped Enough campaign on the head, because officers have got to a position where they're quite happy within their job. But the Copped Enough identifies a number of areas. It identifies the injury, the stress, the trauma that the officers face, the work-life balance that they have, the consideration around, or the lack of consideration around their well-being, and also the pay that they get for the job that they do. So it's the Copped Enough campaign is all-encompassing around what officers are facing. I think it's important as we move forward that we keep focus on the campaign, because unless you give officers a decent pay award for the job that they're doing and the dangers that they face and the trauma and the stress they take home every day, and that has an impact on their family, unless we give the officers a decent pay award, we will continually be doing this Copped Enough campaign with some of the allowances and some of the family-friendly policies that we're trying to change. We're trying to make conditions of service better for officers. But I think the force need to recognise this campaign. I think the chiefs need to understand the significance of it, and we won't give up. We won't relent on this until officers tell us, actually, no, that the job is a nice job. I'm remunerated well. I'm looked after well, and I've got good conditions of service. I think the Copped Enough campaign is very important to shine that light on all the work that we do within the Secretary's world, whether it's pay or conditions, regulatory, pensions. We will continue with that campaign, and we'll continue engaging with members to feed into it.
And you mentioned again about financial constraint and difficulty. Do you think the public look at, say, this pay award, they look at what other public sector workers have got? What do you reckon members of the public who fund, the police service through the Exchequer, what do you think they make of this pay award?
If you asked a member of the public on the street, is this a decent pay award? I think they would say to you, yes, it is a pay award. But then what you have to do then is factor in CPI. So when you factor in CPI, you think, okay, it is a pay increase in real terms. But then you need to look back at the last 15 years. Well, we know that officers are struggling. We know that officers leave because they can get a similar job for the same or more money with less stress and less trauma. So I think the public would see it as a good award, but I think if you explained it to the public, and then I think if you added to that argument that there is an issue now with policing your local area because we don't have the skills and experience to deliver a proper functioning neighbourhood policing plan to reduce knife crime and to deal with complex crime, I think most public would then probably take a different view on it and say, actually, no, I can see the wider picture now. And I think that, yes, officers need a pay award, which is actually a real terms pay award, because we want to retain those officers and compensate them for the dangers of the job.
What do you want to see in the coming months then?
So the first, obviously, the poll, we'll have to get the results of the poll, and then we're going to have to make some decisions moving forward about how we tackle that industrial rights, that move to collective bargaining and binding arbitration. So that's the first thing that we need to decide. We also need to make some decisions on whether or not we re-engage with the pay review body, and also the scheme advisory board for pensions, which we also withdrew from at the same time. So they're two of the bigger areas. In a more detailed world, we need to start working with the Police Consultative Forum, the National Police Chiefs Council, on formulating and trying to agree some proposals around these additional areas that have been identified. Like I said, the first thing that I think will be thrown back at us is this is simply not affordable. And I think we need then to challenge the chiefs. A pay award is not about affordability necessarily. It's about choices. You can choose to move money around and divert money. So it's not just around the money that's available. It's about the choices you make. And with some of these, that would make a real impact on officers and show that the senior management understand the times when the shifts are changed to go on mutual aid for a long period of time. I think moving some money around to compensate for that, I think would really go a long way with officers. So the third area is that more detailed work that we need to do behind the scenes to try and deliver some of these areas where the pay review body want to see some proposals next year.
So plenty to be going at there. You mentioned there again about the collective bargaining. I do hope in due course you'll come back onto the podcast and update us with regards to that. But John, thanks very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much for listening. To find out more, visit polfed.org or email podcast@polfed.org. This podcast is brought to you by the Police Federation of England and Wales. Have your say. Contact us via most social media platforms. Simply search for Police Federation of England and Wales. If there's an issue you'd like us to feature, then email us via podcast@polfed.org.